Children in virtual reality. Sure, daspra. Let's take an easy one. Welcome to daspra Soapbox. Virtual reality is still very much in its infancy. Wherever we take a closer look, VR's newness is obvious. From the hardware being developed and more specifically, the lack of easy integration between a lot of that hardware, to the software charge being led largely by smaller developers, often indie devs even, with a few notable exceptions of course, to, most interestingly, the lack of clearly established societal norms to guide exactly how we all navigate these shared, virtual, social spaces. What exactly do I mean by a lack of clearly established societal norms? Well, I'm glad I asked myself. Robert K. Merton, a prominent sociologist who's often considered to be one of the founders of modern sociology, defined a norm as a principle of right action, binding upon the members of a group and serving to guide, control, or regulate proper and acceptable behavior. That's a lot of words, and I probably couldn't say it any better, but simply speaking, norms can be thought of as rules that are socially enforced. These norms are why most people stop at a stop sign at 3 a.m., even though they can clearly see that no one's coming from either direction, or why many people would rather sit uncomfortably than pass a little gas in public. When a new environment emerges, the norms which govern that space must be established. Some norms are codified by the regulatory agency of the environment. Think the VRChat dev team and their terms of service for VRChat, just as an example. Other norms are created in more informal ways, usually involving feedback from those around us. If you join a public lobby in VRChat and start running around blaring an annoying soundboard, people may laugh with you initially, but if you persist long enough, ideally someone would approach and ask you to stop. This is feedback, letting you know that the behavior you are exhibiting is running contrary to the societal norms that are governing that public lobby. If you don't cooperate with requests to stop, you'll gradually be muted and blocked by people who don't want to have to listen to your soundboard. So, how exactly is all this related to children in virtual reality, or more specifically, in social virtual reality? Enter a team of researchers from Clemson University who published an article in 2020 titled, "It is Complicated: Interacting with Children in Social Virtual Reality." The authors open by establishing that these shared social VR spaces do indeed exist, and that users of all different age groups are attracted to them. This pretty obviously gets at some interesting ethical questions and privacy concerns, as the authors point out. The researchers put together a study where they interviewed folks from VR Reddit forums such as Rec Room, Altspace VR, and VRChat, and also went directly into these spaces to find participants as well. They performed 30 interviews and discovered primary areas of commonality between the participants and their responses regarding children in VR. Number 1. The participants acknowledged that children existed in these social VR spaces, and also acknowledged that interacting with them was complex, citing that children often exhibit immature or naive behavior in social VR. I would suggest that many adults in these social VR spaces are just as guilty, but yes, I hear your concerns and agree wholeheartedly. Number 2. Participants also acknowledged the very real safety concerns they had for children in social VR spaces. They cited children being harassed by other users just because of their age, the tendency of children to share personally identifying information way too quickly, children being exposed to negative social environments. The participants referred to these social environments as the Wild West, and if we think back to our earlier discussion about norms still being formed, that kind of makes sense. And then concerns about excessive use, of course. The third and final thing that was referenced was a trend of different VR applications attracting different age demographics, citing that children tended to congregate in places where gaming was the primary focus, such as Rec Room, whereas older participants seemed to be more interested generally in productivity and social connections over just the gaming aspect of these virtual spaces. I think the participants of the study, as well as the authors, do an amazing job highlighting a lot of the pros and cons of having children in these virtual environments. Children are very much the future of these spaces. They are who companies will be catering to moving forward. So their experiences within these platforms matter. They're meaningful and should absolutely be allowed to continue. Going back to the piece about societal norms, I think it is primarily the responsibility of all of us as denizens of these virtual spaces to hold everyone accountable, to establish these norms, to expect that people are behaving appropriately in public spaces. The tools already exist to simply move to a closed, private space with folks of similar age or maturity levels if you want to participate in behavior that's inappropriate to display around young people. Remember, we were all young at one point, and every single one of us were given a chance by someone, even though we probably annoyed them occasionally. Being young, being socially naive, these are challenging on their own, not to mention the added complexity of navigating a virtual environment which still has not yet completely established its own norms. Next time a child comes running by you in a virtual environment, maybe take just a second to think about what constructive responses you could offer instead of engaging in the more destructive ones. Thank you, sincerely thank you, to those of you out there who already engage in this behavior. And a huge thank you to the young people who are interested in these virtual environments. You are the catalyst of growth for these platforms moving forward, and I appreciate you for what you add to the platforms as well. Thanks for listening to my ramblings and rantings. This has been daspra Soapbox.